Hello and welcome to Reality Check. I'm your host, Ross Coulthart, and today we're taking you to a place very unusual but very well known. And who would have thought it? Greenland, a hotbed of UFOs. That's if you accept the extraordinary evidence gathered by our guest today, podcaster, lawyer and UFO researcher Martin Kleist. Now, Martin, I'm going to get you to tell me how to pronounce the name of your UFO podcast. Can you give it to me in Danish, please?
The name of the podcast is Uforklarligt, so in English that translates into unexplainable.
Uforklarligt.
Uforklarligt, yeah. Almost.
So the word unexplainable in Danish has the word UFO in it as well.
Exactly. That's why it's a perfect name for the podcast.
Isn't that a wonderful symmetry? And is it a coincidence also that Greenland, a place that's featured in the news so prominently in recent months with the political toing and froing from President Trump about whether or not the Greenlandians should hand over their section of Denmark for national security reasons. As we all know, President Trump has been running a huge campaign to ask Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, to hand over Greenland. Can you first, before we go any further, Martin, explain this politics to us?
Yeah, I can. I think that, first of all, it has been kind of surreal for us seeing this development happening, because we started off this project around, I think, 2 years ago, where the place that we went to was more or less uninhabited. There lives around 100 people, 120 people, and we didn't know at all at that point that this would be the focal point of a major geopolitical conflict between the US and Denmark and Greenland. So a bit surreal to be a witness to at the moment.
So Greenland is part of Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, headed, of course, by an Australian, Queen Mary, who had the good sense to marry a Danish boy who had turned out to be a potential king. And as I understand it, it's long been an issue of dispute between America and Denmark. The Americans have tried to get their hands on Greenland in the past, haven't they?
Yes, for many years. I think actually it goes back to around the 18th century that the US wanted to have some kind of possession over Greenland. So, and they have had a huge military presence in Greenland historically. But now the military presence is quite limited to the space base, Pituffik space base up in the high north in Greenland in Thule.
So what fascinates me is you have made a fascinating documentary about sightings in southern Greenland, and you've travelled to the region with a documentarian called, forgive me if I mispronounce this, Lasse Rahbek. Is that a good pronunciation? Have I done all right?
That's close enough, yeah. Lasse Rahbek, yeah, that's true.
And you've basically caught imagery, video of a mysterious light phenomenon that's been reported for some time by local residents. Let's have a look first at your trailer, which is a beautiful tribute to the beauty of Greenland.
Altså af alle de her uidentificerede flyvende ting og sager, der ligesom er, der kan 99% af det forklares. Og den interessante del er jo den sidste del af det, som ikke kan forklares. Er det en af de her, altså er det en del af den ene procent, der ikke kan forklares?
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Dykker man virkelig ned i UFO-fænomenet, så går det op for en, at det er virkeligt. Og nu har vi så fundet et sted i Grønland, hvor alle ser de her flyvende objekter.
Der kom 3 frem bag fra fjeldet, og så nogle sekunder efter, så kom der 2 frem også, som fløj direkte til værs, altså.
Den skifter jo retning.
Ja, den flyver sådan.
Den skifter retning, ja. Det er gakkelagt, det her. Jamen, det er det. Det er det jo.
Så vi er her. Og så er det jo den her retning, det er set i. Første aften, jeg var med derude, der var de meget kraftige. Ja. Altså som virkelig kraftige. Det lignede jo sådan en projektor fra en helikopter, der kom flyvende næsten. Ja. Altså.
At der er spøgelser i Narsarsuaq.
Der er nogen, der siger, der er spøgelser i Narsarsuaq, ja.
Men nu er vi nede ved havnen, hvor der ikke er ret meget lys. Og nu sætter jeg lige noget kameragrej op.
Ja.
Det er der. Det der var ikke satellitter.
Det så ja, det så godt.
Nu har jeg jo lavet det her i 12 år. Altså, jeg har ikke set noget, der opfører sig på den måde der før. Altså, det er et eller andet fænomen, der udsender et lys af sig selv.
Hvad tænker du, det er?
UFO'er. Det må det være.
Altså, han ved udmærket godt, hvad det er for et projekt, vi har gang i. Ja. Han ved godt, altså, hans ry og omdømme.
I vores kultur er det meget åbent at snakke om overnaturlige historier, oplevelser og den slags, og det er meget accepteret. Dine øjne ser en verden, jeg ikke ser. Jeg kan aldrig nogensinde vide, hvad det er, du ser.
Jeg ved ikke hvorfor, men jeg føler også, at der er sådan et eller andet på spil, eller han er nok også meget om mig selv, ikke? Andet end et eller andet lysfænomen, som ingen ved, hvad er.
So, Martin, Greenland looks like a beautiful place. What was it that you were told in 2023, I think by a local pilot from a town called, is it Narsarsuaq in southern Greenland?
Narsarsuaq, yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult name to pronounce, but yeah, it's Narsarsuaq. I got contacted by a now former Greenlandic pilot, and he told me about his own very remarkable UFO encounter during a landing with a helicopter in Narsarsuaq. He saw a oval-shaped object hanging near an edge of clouds during the landing in Narsarsuaq, which in itself is a very remarkable sighting. But what he also told me was that these objects were actually being seen on a daily basis up there, and not only by local people living there, they were being witnessed by very credible witnesses such as pilots, air traffic controllers, flight mechanics, and so on. And I was like, this almost sounds too good to be true. But again, I can't dismiss the quality of the witness, so to speak. So I reached out to my good friend and colleague Lasse, as you mentioned, and said, I've heard about this story. I think we need to go right now, actually, because they're seeing them up there right now. So I think we left within a week for Greenland to see if we could see something for ourselves. And that was a very interesting trip, I must say, the first trip up there, because we did see stuff for ourselves up there at the first trip.
Let's go back to that pilot for a moment. So he was seeing a light, just a light, or was it a solid object?
That was my interpretation of it, was that it was a solid object, an oval-shaped object, very luminous, hanging near the edge of some clouds. Quite big, as he told me, and suddenly it just disappeared, and his colleagues saw it as well.
Did it register on his plane's radar? Did he see it on his radar?
I'm not aware of that, but I don't think that they saw anything on radar, and that's one of the things up there. They have very limited radar capacities up there, and that's also a lot of what the discussions goes around at the moment up there, because we are lacking defense capabilities and capabilities to detect stuff in the sky up there.
Well, President Trump wants to come in and give you all manner of assistance if you just become a citizen of America, Martin. Yeah. How do you think the Greenlandians feel about that, by the way?
Not very good. I'm part Greenlandic myself, actually, so I also have some feelings invested in this, and being a witness to this discussion that has been going around for quite a long time now has been quite surreal, and I think actually it's a symptom of a much larger problem, because the Greenlandic people always feel that the discussions in Copenhagen here in Denmark sort of goes over the Greenlandic people's heads. So when they do any political discussions or decisions, Denmark mostly come up there and say, now we need to learn you about politics. Now we're going to tell you about what you should do and so on. And I think the Greenlandic people are quite tired of that.
Well, one of the scandals I am aware of, and I learned about this actually recently from a fantastic podcast called The Rest is Classified. And one of the reporters on that podcast, Gordon Carrera, used to work for the BBC, and he told a fascinating story of how the Thule Air Base, which is, I understand, an American air base in Greenland, it had nuclear weapons, and this had been kept secret from the people of Greenland and, of course, most of the citizens of Denmark. And there was a secret agreement between the country of Denmark and the United States to allow the US Air Force to keep nuclear-armed planes on the soil of Greenland. That all came out in 1995. Was that a big political issue at the time, Martin?
Nuclear weapons and nuclear material in Greenland has always been a big discussions for the Danes, and my interpretation of it is that we don't really have any clear idea about what they are actually doing up there, because there's this defense agreement between the US and Denmark from 1951 that basically gives all the rights that the US wants to have facilities, military facilities up there and do whatever they want. And that's also why the whole discussion right now about Trump wanting to have more military presence up there is sort of, I don't know, pseudo in some way, because they actually do have the right to do whatever they want. They can just call up Denmark or the prime minister and she would say yes anytime. And I think that in terms of nuclear weapons and nuclear material, we have had some projects in Greenland which the Americans initiated. For instance, the Project Iceworm, where they wanted to build like an underground city where they could store missiles and build silos. But they then realized that the ice was moving, so they had to give up on the project. But they actually left like a nuclear reactor up there. And also there's a story about a B-52 bomber crashing up there with, I think it was hydrogen weapons on board, and one of the weapons disappeared beneath the ice. So the discussions about what the Americans has done up there and their activities are they just make a mess every time they do something in Greenland, to be honest.
Well, that was one of the stories that was told on this podcast I was talking about, that there were 4 nuclear weapons on board a B-52 bomber that crashed in 1968 off the end of the Thule Air Base in Greenland, and it crashed in Baffin Bay in icy waters and sank. And they were able to recover, I think, 3 of these thermonuclear weapons, hydrogen bombs, as you say. But I find it incredible that under the waters of Baffin Bay, to this day, there is a hydrogen bomb. There is a nuclear weapon, a thermonuclear weapon that God forbid anybody would ever recover. I presume it's degraded long by now. Do you suspect that the objects that are being seen, these anomalous objects that are being seen by locals in this town, Narsarsuaq, do you believe that there is some kind of connection to the nuclear weapons at the American base?
I don't think so in terms of what's going on in Narsarsuaq. I think it entails something else, because it's a very, very long way from Thule Air Base. It's called Pitufuk Space Base now. It's operated by the Space Force, and there's a very long way from the north to the southern tip of Narsarsuaq where these lights are being seen. So I don't think so. No.
So Narsarsuaq's right down the very bottom in the southern fjords of Greenland, and Pitufuk, which used to be Thule Air Base, the one I'm talking about, that's right up in the north. Is that right?
Yeah, very much high up in the north, yeah.
And what I find fascinating is Vice President J.D. Vance visited the Pitufuk Air Base in the period before the election. I mean, there was a lot of priority given by the Trump team. Okay, let's ask it this way. You don't think there's a UFO nukes connection necessarily, but do you think that the UFOs are a subject of interest, or do you suspect that they're a subject of interest at the Pituffik Space Base? What's the purpose of the Pituffik Space Base? And do you think there are other agendas from the president, Mr. Trump, and they're different from perhaps the rare earth minerals explanation? We're all told that Greenland has an enormous amount of rare earth minerals that are very, very important to national security, and that we need access to those rare earth minerals, and America needs, for some reason, to take over Greenland in order to achieve that. There's not a lot of logic in that, because I would have thought from the sound of it, your government would allow the Americans to dig up whatever they wanted in Greenland to facilitate the defence agreement. What's your take on all of this? What's Pituffik all about? And is the rare earth minerals issue an issue as well?
I think that the primary focus for the space base up there is to monitor what comes in and out of our atmosphere. It basically serves as an early missile warning system for everything that comes from the east, for instance, Russia. So they are carefully monitoring whatever comes in and out of the atmosphere up there. And that's sort of their key focus. So I find it very hard to imagine that the Space Force wouldn't be aware about what's going on. And you have reported quite a lot about the objects that were seen near the Arctic Circle during the shoot-downs back in 2023, where many of these objects were seen in the Arctic region. And I think that I really think that they do have some kind of knowledge about what's flying around up there. We also heard from, I think it was Daily Mail, who wrote that that Space Force core mission right now is sort of challenged by all of these anomalous objects that's being seen everywhere around the world. And I think that also makes the case for Pituffik Space Base. They are seeing anomalous objects. If they're saying, Space Force, that they're seeing anomalous objects, it might be also seen from there. I think that's highly likely.
Now, where you really caught my attention, Martin, was when you sent me what you and Lassie had filmed with your video camera. It's obviously you caught a lot of imagery. You caught imagery that we'll go into in detail, but there is one dramatic video of an object rising from behind the mountain. Can you paint the scene for me of what we're about to see?
Yes, we are in Narsarsuaq, and these objects are primarily being seen when we have like clear skies and during the evening time. And actually, as I said, it's many credible witnesses who see this, and we were brought there by one guy who's closely affiliated with the airport up there, so a highly credible witness. And we went there almost every evening, actually, seeing different kind of lights come up from behind the mountain. And the video that we are about to see I think sometimes videos is not good to represent what you actually see with your naked eye, because this was very extreme to witness. It was a light that came up from behind the mountain, and we could see it even before it came up from behind the mountain because the light was so bright. And we have an infrared camera, so we can see everything on the sky, even the smallest satellites. We can see them fly around, but these objects, they sort of come up and then they become very big and bright, and then they just disappear. We cannot figure out whether they're going away with high speeds, or if they're just simply vanishing from sight. But we have seen during our first trip, we also saw them change direction, come up, like flying, meeting each other, going around, and suddenly shoot off with a speed where you can't follow it with your eye. So, yeah.
So let's take a look. Let's have a look at this incredible imagery that you've obtained. I mean, it's some of the best UFO video I've seen in a while. Here we go.
Hold up! Wow! Hold da op.
That really is quite something, Martin. Tell me what you were feeling as you saw that.
I was shocked. I think I was shocked. We also saw a light up there. This is not that light, but we saw a light up there that came up that was completely red, and it just disappeared. And I remember, I think it's very human to think, what is it that I'm seeing? And I remember when we got back home, the three of us, we went up, three guys up there, and we were like, what is this? And my dreams were like recurring about this every night while we were being up there, because it is, even though I'm into the subject and I'm interested and I know there's something to this subject, it was just a different thing to witness it. It was quite shocking in many ways, actually. It really turned my world upside down in many ways, I must admit that.
So you say that you were using an infrared camera with obviously a pretty good lens that night. Mm-hmm. Could you see this with your naked eye, with the human eye?
Oh yeah, definitely. With the human eye, it's like it sort of looks like at the same as it does on the infrared camera. It's very, very big, and sometimes there's more lights coming up doing different kind of maneuvers. It's sort of the best way I could describe it is when a plane is taxiing out from the gate and to the runway. It does like turns, go this and that direction, and then it enters the runway, and then it sort of shoots away. It seems like that.
Let's look at the debunking arguments. I mean, obviously you're near an airport. Could it be an approaching aircraft? And could it be that we were mistaking a landing light from an approaching aircraft?
Yeah, I must say I'm also a very skeptical person, even though I'm interested in this subject. I think you need to be skeptical, but there's like being skeptic, but there's also being unreasonable skeptic. I've been there. There's nothing up there. They think that's behind the ice here or the mountain. That's the ice cap. There's nothing else but ice for hundreds
that's the point.
Kilometers.
So we're not talking about any human settlement up at the top of that mountain. What is there?
No. There's nothing but ice. Nothing but ice. But I'm not here to make any argument about what we are actually seeing, because we don't know what we are seeing. And I think the most intriguing thing about all of this is the fact that all of the surrounding circumstances about these lights are the most weird part, because when these lights come up, we see flashes of light, like flash bulbs around completely different areas of the sky. We see like these flash bulbs come up, and we could sort of predict, actually, when we saw some flash bulbs coming, we could see that just in a minute, and you can hear that on some of our footage, just in a minute, a new light will come up, and surely the light come up. So
it was almost weird. Predictive. You'd see the flashes, and then you'd see the big orb coming up.
Yeah, and we also had several instances where we sort of, this might sound weird, but there's a clear consciousness element to this, because we sort of communicated with it as well. We could look at the sky and sometimes just like being jokingly saying, if there's something really here and this is anomalous, please give us a sign. And right where we are looking, we see this flash. Doof. We tried that so many times up there. So it seems very playful in some way.
Did you capture that on film?
You can hear us talking about it, but we didn't catch that on film, because our cameraman, he was actually standing with his back to me and my friend, and we were looking up at the sky and said that, and then this big flash came around. And we have actually tried that quite a number of times, where our instruments, our camera equipment sort of malfunction in many weird ways, especially during our first trip up there. We had like a lot of material just on mysterious ways just disappeared, both from hard drives and the SD cards. It's like having your washing machine and your car breaking down at the same time. There's no correlation, but it happened. So, yeah.
So you knew you'd taken certain images of certain video, and then when you went back to find it, it had disappeared.
It has disappeared, yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Was there any possibility that somebody could have got access to your hard drives without you knowing?
No, I don't think so. I think that this project started out with us wanted to see this light for ourselves and figure out what's going on in Narsarsuaq, but it became into a whole other movie because it also became a movie about how this phenomenon sort of transcends the way we are thinking in many ways, because there's this huge consciousness component to it, and my suspicion is, having done this for around 2 years now, is that I'm not so sure that the UFO phenomenon is here to be understood. I think it maybe is here to sort of transform our way of thinking. That's maybe very Jacques Vallée-ish in many ways, but he's talking about something that's called recursive unsolvability, where like things cannot be solved within the system itself. It's sort of complicated, but it's like an eye can't see an eye for itself, or a camera cannot take a picture of itself. And I think in many ways, my suspicion is that there's something to that in regards to the UFO phenomenon for sure.
So without wanting to sound too pointy-headed, I mean, I love what you're saying here because I agree with you. I'm increasingly coming to the view that the purpose of these displays is some kind of attempt at an epistemic ontological wake-up, that it's trying to twig our consciousness. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, completely. I've had so many weird experiences throughout doing this, and some of the experiences, I can tell you a funny story. Actually, we were filming for a completely different film. I was moving out of my apartment, and I just needed to clean up some stuff on top of a closet I had. That was the only thing left in my apartment, and I just needed to see whether there was something up there. And then I found a Greenlandic flag and a book called Life in the Universe, and I took it down. I was like, that's weird. And we didn't know anything about the story in Greenland. We didn't know anything about what we were supposed to do later on or anything like that. So we have had so many things that we sort of
So you actually feel you're a bit shy about admitting it, but you feel you were given a bit of a prod by something to take an interest in Greenland.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, I'm part Greenlandic, so this came very close to my heart. And hearing all these discussions about Greenland and the US and Denmark at the moment, it kind of makes me feel sad. And that's also why I chose to appear on your show now, because I think there's many nuances to this story. And we can maybe go a bit into that, because what is the authorities doing about all of this in Greenland at the moment? That's the next question, right?
I'm very glad you did come on our show, Martin, and I think our viewers will be fascinated to hear and see what you've captured. Tell me a little bit about the indigenous peoples of Greenland. Is there like an indigenous native population of Greenland?
Yes, but it's very, very limited. And I think, to be also with respect to the Greenlandic people, I think they have also come a bit away from their native heritage, but there are native people who are up there who have thoughts about this. In mythology, they have a saying about flying kayaks traveling from the spirit world to our world, and that's sort of like things that maybe people like Diana Pasolka has talked about as well, that we have these myth or descriptive talks about what they are actually seeing. And we actually spoke to a native shaman up there who told us that we have been seeing these lights forever. We know they're here. We know the red lights, but we don't write them down. It's only the white man who writes them down. And I think that's very indicative for maybe all this UFO discussion as well. I think we need, especially in terms of native people, I think we need to be more respectful for their way of thinking and their way of dealing with these topics, because in Greenland they do really have, it's an integrated part of their reality, having a supernatural view. It's not supernatural for them. They have been living with nature forever. So UFOs or hunting, it's just a part of nature for them.
Do they, when you say that they've got a long history of seeing these objects, do the locals talk openly about seeing them? Is there a candor? Are people prepared to talk about it, or are they a little bit shy about discussing it?
Of course, they're a bit shy. The Greenlandic people are not the most talkative people. You need to build up a certain kind of trust, and that has also meant quite a bit of work for us, of course, because it is a different topic. It's a difficult topic, but I think that they're comfortable talking about this because ghost stories and things that's going on in the mountains, it's not very new for them. It's an integrated part of their worldview in many ways, at least for some of them. I can't speak for all of them, but I feel it's different from the Western world, at least.
Let's talk about the objects. You described an oval object that was seen by the pilot. The imagery that I've seen from what you've sent me suggests a lot of the time it's white, oval, or spherical objects. What other shapes, if any, were there, and are they always at night?
Not always at night, no. They are also being seen during daylight. I actually witnessed one myself during a hiking trip when we were up there last time. I said to the other guys, I think I just saw some weird stuff in the sky, but it was just maybe like something, I don't know. I saw it just briefly. And then I talked with a woman later on, and she said, I saw this weird object hanging in the sky, and I was like, well, we saw the same thing then. It wasn't just something in the sky. So they appear during daytime as well. And when you look at the objects through a binocular or something like that, people describe them as being cone-shaped, emitting different kind of lights from the bottom, green, red, orange. So they emit some kind of light if you look at them through binoculars. And people have also been telling us, and this is like highly credible witnesses, sort of flight mechanics saying that they have seen structured craft up there, circling around near the city, right? So, yeah.
Do you think the United States Pituffik Space Surveillance Base would know about what you're seeing and what the locals are seeing?
I'm not so sure, because I spoke with a Greenlandic pilot about this, the guy with the UFO encounter with the oval-shaped object, and he said, it's a very funny thing. He said, we want to know everything that goes around in the world. We want to understand everything in the world. But when it comes to UFOs, we don't want to learn anything about it. We just want to keep it under wraps. We don't want to talk about it. We want to see it. And I think that was quite telling for the way that the Danish authorities also at least handled this. And I think that this story actually has the potential to make the government or the authorities that right now are having huge discussion about security in Greenland, they should pick this up. They should take this seriously, not at least from a security policy perspective, but more in the perspective about taking the Greenlandic people serious, because they have made inquiries and they have reported this to the authorities, but they're getting sort of stonewalled. And I think
so there's been an official concern in Greenland, in the governing people in Greenland. They've raised this with Denmark back in Copenhagen. What has been the response?
The Greenlandic people up there, the witnesses has reported it to the Arctic Command up there. That is sort of the defense unit up there who's in control of everything that goes around military up there. And they have referred the reports to the Greenlandic police, and I have gained public insight into how they've actually dealt with the cases, and they just shelved the cases. And actually, they say that they haven't had any UFO sightings within the last 10 years. Our former defense minister has said that, and I had got a confirmation from the Danish Defense Command that their stance on this is still that they didn't have any UFO encounters, neither in Greenland or in Denmark.
So the evidence that you and Lasse have obtained is actually quite historically important, because it shows the lie to what your former defense minister was saying.
It is a lie, because it comes down to how do you define a UFO encounter. If you're not cataloging or collecting reports, of course you don't have any reports. And I asked them, do you collect reports from military witnesses? No, we don't have any system for registration of that. And if civilian reported, they are being referred to a amateur association, a UFO association that that's not my words, but they are being rumored to be unjustifiable or skeptics, so to speak. So I've sometimes wondered that it sort of feels like something that's being done with arrow in many ways, right?
So you don't think for sure that the Americans know about what you're seeing in Sasasuaq and what the locals are talking about, but it's well known in the Greenland community that these objects have been seen for a long, long time.
Actually, a Danish media outlet for not that long time ago actually made a story about that Trump's interest in Greenland actually centers around the southern part of Greenland, and especially this place because it's full of rare earth minerals and uranium, of course. And actually, there's a legal dispute going on right now between the Danish government and also an Australian mining company.
And ETI, I know this story well, and they're claiming, I think, 11 billion Australian dollars from the Danish government because the government declared that it was going to ban uranium mining, and apparently they'd previously supported uranium mining. Has there been a change of government in the last year or so in Denmark?
There's a new government in Greenland as well. We just had an election in Greenland, and I'm not quite sure what their stance on this is, but I think the facts are clear. If they're digging for rare earth minerals in what's called Kvanefjellet, that's the mountain up there that's rich on all these things, they will undoubtedly pull up uranium and make a mess, do a lot of pollution, and I don't think it's in anyone's interest.
So, Martin, can I ask you this? Have you been able to do any research on whether there's a correlation between the known rare earth uranium deposits and other deposits of precious metals and the sightings that you've been collating of unidentified anomalous phenomena? Is there a correlation?
I'm quite sure there's a correlation in that way. We spoke with some of the locals up there who said jokingly, maybe they're coming here to collect uranium or something like that. My sense, my gut feeling, I don't know, but it kind of looks like, especially during our first trip up there where we were seeing them doing like maneuvers and stuff like that, it definitely looked like that they were doing something. It looked like that they were performing some kind of task. Difficult to say what kind of task, but we have
what were they doing that made you think it was a task that they were performing?
Just the way they came up and another object came up, and then they sort of met and did like different kind of maneuvers around and then shut off. It seems like it was, I don't know, like a point where they were coming in and out from. It's highly speculative. We don't know anything about what this is, what it actually is, but it looks anomalous. That's the only thing I can conclude, right?
What direction? I mean, obviously you saw the large glowing orb come up from behind the mountain. From where that orb rose, is it solid land that it must have come out of, or is it valleys? I mean, what are we talking about? Did it come from within the ice cap, or what's behind that mountain?
That's the big question. What's behind that mountain is just ice. So during our second trip up there, we actually chartered a helicopter, and I must say this is fully self-funded. So it has been quite an expensive thing to do, but we need to figure out what this is about. So we chartered a helicopter up there to the top of the mountain where you see the lights come up from. And we have had very good weather, and we have like the most beautiful scenery with northern lights that we could almost touch up there. It was actually, it's a bit of a luxury problem, but it actually hindered our view a bit with all the northern lights. But we saw the lights as well come up, and it was very difficult to say where they came up from, if it was beneath the ice, from behind the horizon. It seemed at that point like it was further away, and that kind of correlates with our feelings about this playing with us. It has been playing with us since we started doing this whole documentary project.
So you haven't been able to triangulate where it was in the sky, how far away it was and how high it was, that would obviously hinder your ability to say how large it was, but it sure as hell looks like an enormous object. What's the distance from where you were filming to the mountain ranges from behind where it rose?
It's about 10 to 15 kilometers from there.
So it's clearly a huge object. I mean, we're talking about a gigantic, if it is a craft, a gigantic craft.
It is, and I think that's also very Jacques Vallée-ish, so to speak. And I think Jeffrey Kripal also speaks a bit to that. But we have always felt throughout this project that there's a sort of a pendulum swinging forth and back. Also during the movie, where we are like, are this just satellites or are this truly anomalous? And then the day after, we see something completely out of this world, so to speak, and then the pendulum swings back again. So this thing where the stuff always seems to be in sort of a gray area, I think we witnessed this characteristic very much firsthand for ourselves, at least.
Could these objects just be optical illusions? Were you able, for example, to talk to the radar operators or the air traffic controllers at Saskatchewan Airport to find out if they've ever seen anomalies on their screens?
They don't pick up anything on their radar, and I don't think that they have the radar capabilities to detect these things up there. I think the main radar capability that we have there, not entirely sure, but that's truly air-based. And what I also learned from the Danish Defense Command, which is representative for the Danish Defense Ministry, is that they're not speaking with the Americans about this. I inquired and I said, do you speak with the Americans about this? Do you share any data about this? And they said, no, we don't.
About UAPs.
About UAPs in both Danish and Greenlandic airspace, and they denied that. We don't speak with the Americans about this.
This is one thing I've never understood. You know, it's a bit like the drone saga over New Jersey and the east coast of America. Everybody
and here in Copenhagen as well.
And in Copenhagen as well. Yeah. I mean, whatever they are, we know that some kind of anomalous object is making incursions into very sensitive national security airspace. And here you have objects, unidentified objects, apparently solid, maneuvering intelligently over an extremely resource-sensitive area of Greenland, which even the President of the United States admits is a national security sensitive part of the world. Why wouldn't the Danish military command prioritize finding out what these objects are?
It is so weird, and that's also the reason why I am appearing on your show. Normally you don't go out with findings and stuff like that before you release your film, but since this whole political debate has exploded, I think we need some people at least who have like a superficial, so to speak, knowledge into this. Also needs to appear and say this is a paradox. You're having so many discussions about security in Greenland, but in reality, it seems like you're not giving excuse my language, right? But they don't.
So you do believe there's a correlation between where these objects are appearing and known deposits of certain rare earth minerals?
Yeah, sure, because if you look at what happened in Rua in Zimbabwe back in, I think it was the 90s, there was also some kind of mine nearly located to this. And if you look at what's going on in Hessdalen in Norway, which is actually quite remarkable at the same latitude as Narsarsuaq is, exactly on the same latitude. Wow. So we have many interesting connections there, and I think there's a link to the rare earth minerals, and that could be both foreign adversaries checking it out, or it could also be non-human intelligences. Who knows?
I mean, it's speculative, but do you believe that the Americans' interest in the rare earth minerals is one of the reasons why these objects are showing themselves over the mountain ranges, or is that just too much of a speculation for you?
I don't think it's too much of a speculation. We need to speculate. That's how we do and make scientific breakthroughs. And I think we need to speculate because this area up there is it is the focal point for the major, the biggest geopolitical conflict there has been that has ever been in Denmark since the World War II. And actually, I spoke with one of the witnesses up there, and I asked him, "What do you think these objects are?" And that's 2 years ago or something like that. And he said, I think this has some time component to it. I think it might be time travel and time travelers or something like that, which Michael P. Masters has been alluding to. And I was like, time travelers here in the most remote part of the world where nothing is going on. I couldn't really see the connection. And now we are here 2 years later with Greenland being the focal point of the most biggest conflict in political terms in Denmark since World War II, right? So who knows?
So they were basically flagging that this area is going to be an area of interest. Isn't it unusual that they went to, of all places, Greenland, to the Pituffik space base?
And I know that you have spoken with his son, Donald Trump Jr., right? So I know he's highly interested in the UFO subject, and who knows, he might be privy to more information about what's actually going on than we are. And I think that if you look at how many anomalous objects that are being witnessed in the Arctic, I think actually the Arctic is one of the biggest hotspots, especially because it is so remote up there.
You know, it's funny, I interviewed Christopher Mellon about 2-3 years ago now, and he confirmed that shortly before the series of 2023 sightings that we all reported on, these anomalous objects, that one of them being a Chinese balloon that was seen across the continental United States and Canada. Shortly before that incident, I think it was on the 1st of February 2023, he heard what I'd heard from a source in NORAD, which is that there were 9 UAPs that were detected very close to the Arctic Circle, slap bang in the middle of the Arctic. And there were jets deployed on an exercise, I think on the Alaskan side of the Arctic Circle, and they were told to scramble as fast as they could to get to these 9 objects. And the interesting thing is that by the time they even got anywhere within close to those objects, the objects just disappeared in an instant off the radar screen. And I was told the radar operator...
And that's actually a very interesting information, and I would very much like to know which kind of direction that these objects flitted to. Could it be Greenland?
So would I. I wasn't told that detail. But I mean, it's all, I mean, I guess when you're at the top of the world like that, it's all very close together. I mean, Alaska's not that far from Greenland as the crow flies. And of course, as America knows, it's not that far from Russia. And this is why Greenland is of such strategic importance. Do you buy the explanation from the United States that Greenland is a national security imperative because of, one, its strategic location, and also its national security importance because of those rare earth minerals? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense if, as you say, the Denmark government's going to give them what they want anyway.
Yes, I think it's very difficult for the Danes and also the Greenlandic people to figure out what's actually going on, because the US, they can more or less do whatever they want up there. For me at least, I have a difficult time figuring out what's the primary goal with it. I don't think, and I must say, I don't think it has anything to do with anomalous objects being seen in the sky, because I don't think that I think the US might be aware due to the Space Force activities in the northern part of Greenland. But what the sense that I got from the Danish Defense Command and so on is that they are not taking this seriously. And I think, and that's also a thing that I want to say, a lot of the political discussions, it goes over the head of the Greenlandic people, and and I think this case is sort of a symptom of that the Greenlandic people sort of report something to the authorities, and when you gain insight into how the Danish government are actually handling these inquiries or reports, the Danish government just swoops it off and say, well, there's nothing to look at here. So that it's a very good example on how the Danish government always just try to tell the Greenlandic people what's best for them. And I think that's highly critical, especially considering that there's things flying up there that no one knows what is.
Why do you think the Americans really want Greenland?
I think it is due to military security concerns, because we have seen like the waters up there are melting. It creates new ships paths, and I think it's about the rare earth minerals, definitely, and there's also more to the story in terms of the rare earth minerals that might not be suitable for discussing here, but there is things that kind of indicates that the US has an invested interest in what's going on up there.
So I'm aware from my own sources that there are certain types of rare earth minerals that are absolutely vital for some of the US's most sensitive weaponry, including nuclear weapons. And some of those rare earth minerals are only obtainable in certain parts of the planet. Really does beg the question, is there somebody else taking a close interest in those rare earth minerals as well? I mean, your potential documentary is going to be asking some very interesting questions, Martin.
Yeah, and I think we need to look at our defense contractors and our partners in Greenland, because PD Fug Space Base, which it's called now, the former Thule Air Base, Battelle Memorial Institute actually also has a role to play there, because they're handling stuff such as security clearances and all sorts of other stuff in the Thule Air Base. And they actually do also have a research facility at the middle of the ice cap called Camp Summit, and that's being operated by Battelle Memorial Institute. And people who know a bit about the UFO subject might also know that that could be interesting.
Could be interesting. So you're telling me Battelle Memorial Institute have a research facility separate from Pituffik Space Station in Greenland?
Yeah, in the middle of the ice cap, on top of the ice cap, yeah.
And what exactly is Battelle Corporation researching?
I think they're just doing scientific research into...
Oh, of course they are. Yeah, they wouldn't be doing anything for any military applications or anything like that. This is fascinating, Martin. And do people ask any questions in Greenland when an organization like Battelle suddenly establishes a research institute in the middle of Greenland?
No, usually our Danish politicians, they don't even ask questions about anything in terms of defense contractors or anything like that. We happily just buy a big amount of airplanes from Lockheed Martin or do deals with the Battelle Memorial Institute, and I don't think that our politicians are very much interested in this subject, but they should be, because we have documented, at least I would say, some of the footage that we got. It can be discussed, it can be analyzed, and that's not what our film is about. Our film is not anything sensational or revelatory or anything like that. It is actually about how the UFO phenomenon transform people. And so that's also why I'm appearing here, because maybe someone else can pick up the journalistic ball and run with it, because it's not for us. And actually I've felt a bit frustrated with the fact that this whole thing has exploded in our hands the way it has done, because there are things flying up there. So we're having all these hypothetical political discussions about how many new drones should we have in Greenland, and maybe Russia or China could fly or do something else up there. But we can document that basically, if you want to fly up there, you can do whatever you want. And the Danish authorities, on at least what they're telling me, are not doing anything about it.
So this isn't a political issue at all, the issue of unexplained anomalous phenomena appearing over Sasaswak, which is one of the most sensitive rare earth minerals locations in the world.
For sure. Yeah, I think the political implications of this is much bigger. And I think I also told you, sent you a clip from a Danish fiction series that's also on Netflix right now. It's called Born, and it actually surrounds a geopolitical conflict in Greenland, Denmark, and US that's sparked by an unidentified flying object up there. So it sort of sets the scene of how big this actually is. If there's actually things flying around up there that no one knows what is, we need to look into it and investigate it.
So, Martin, I'm not saying this is happening, but if hypothetically Battelle Memorial Institute was test flying, I don't know, some kind of anomalous craft in one of the most remote parts of the world, you couldn't go far wrong by going to a place like Greenland, could you?
Would be a very good place to do it. And we have heard many stories, and I'm looking very much forward to putting out our documentary, because we have done some completely amazing interviews with not just local, with like highly credible people who have seen the most amazing stuff up there.
Well, I'm looking forward to your film. What are you going to call it, and when can we see it?
In Danish, it's going to be called, we're not completely sure yet, but I think in Danish we're going to call it Den, der ligner en tallerken, and that's in English that translates into the one that looks like a plate, the one that looks like a plate.
And when can we expect it to be released?
I think we are having another trip to Greenland during summer, and as you also mentioned here, couldn't it be fun to go out on the ice, to travel even further out to see if we could come even closer? So there's still some stuff that we need that we might need to do in terms of all of this. But I don't know. It's good things takes long time. So I don't know. Maybe a year, 2 years. I don't know.
Well, I can tell you here in Australia, it gets my goat that there's a huge lump of Australia at a place called Pine Gap that we Australians aren't allowed to go near, and it's an American base in the middle of Australia. How close can you get to the Pituffik base, or for that matter, the Battelle Memorial Institute Scientific Research Centre in Greenland?
Quite close. I think you just need to have the proper security clearances and so on, but I think that's Battelle who administrated of them.
But can a Greenland citizen, they can't walk into the joint, can they?
No, they cannot. It's a military facility, and I don't think that they do. It's a very limited number of personnel up there, and I don't think they do. And I think also we need to tamper down the speculations just a little bit, because of course it's interesting that Battelle has some kind of appearance up there, but basically it's a very, very small base. Of course they have some extreme good radar capabilities up there, and they're monitoring the sky, but the leap from going there to speculating into whether they're involved in something completely crazy out of this world, I think that would be quite a maybe also too big of a leap. But it's an interesting connection, of course. I would admit that as well.
Well, I certainly think it's worth investigating. Martin Kleist, thank you so much for contacting me and for speaking to us here at Reality Check. I know your interview with me is going to prompt a lot of interest. The issue of Greenland is at the forefront right now of national security attention. And frankly, if people didn't know about the UFO connection before now, they surely know after this interview. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Russ. Yep. And I think I must also underline that the Greenlandic foreign policy, their overarching framework at the moment, is nothing about Greenland without Greenland. And I think that's very important as well. And I think we should all remember that right now.
Thanks very much. And before we go, please don't forget we do our weekly question and answer, and we need your questions. So please send your questions in by email to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. G'day and welcome to Reality Check in the continuing series of full-length interviews with the people who were part of our UAP primetime special Hunting UFOs. Today it's Lieutenant Colonel John Blitch. He was another of the interviewees who strongly backed the credibility of our primary interviewee in that story, Jake Barber. Colonel Blitch has an impressive CV. He's a former Pershing II nuclear missile battery commander, a Special Forces detachment commander, and he was a troop commander at the Combat Applications Group, otherwise known as Delta Force, one of the most elite units in the US military. For those who are unfamiliar, Delta Force is a top Tier 1 Special Mission Unit along with the Navy's DevGRU, that's the SEAL Team 6, and the US Air Force's 24th Special Tactics Squadron. It's very rare to get someone with a Delta Force background speaking on the record and willing to step forward, like Colonel Blitch. John's also been a program manager at DARPA, the Defence Advanced Research Projects Agency, developing an expertise in artificial intelligence and tactical mobile robotics, as well as advanced camouflage systems for the individual warfighter. He holds a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering, a master's degree in math and computer science, and a second master's degree and doctorate in cognitive psychology. This is not some ordinary grunt. He's an open-minded cognitive scientist who also served as a visiting professor at the US Air Force Academy, as well as a consultant for the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, NASA, and other agencies. And as you'll hear today in this full interview, he also has a forthcoming book on the abduction phenomenon, in which he tells the story of his own encounter with non-human intelligences, NHI. Here's Colonel John Blitch. So, Colonel John Blitch, it's an honour to be talking to you.
Well, thank you. It's an honour to be here with you.
Tell me a little bit about who you are. What's your background?
Well, I guess, let me see. In a nutshell, I'm an Army nuke turned, I guess, Green Beret, dabbled in hostage rescue, turned robot geek, turned cognitive psychologist.
You were at the one stage at the very top, one of the elite of America's special operations peoples.
Well, I wasn't. I was part of that unit. I would say that I was tolerated while I was there. But yes, I did serve there for about 3.5 years.
Right. And in your time in the military, did anybody ever talk UFOs?
No. I have never had any official discussions about UFOs or extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or anything.
Did you ever think about it?
All the time.
Now, why? Tell our audience why. What happened to you?
Several very deep, emotional, terrifying, what I considered to be dreams at the time, and I still considered them to be dreams all the way up until 2018. And there were several incidents that convinced me otherwise, that I could not scientifically attribute to dreamscape.
What happened?
So my dreams as a kid were terrifying beyond a normal fear. You know, I've been shot at, I've been in mock POW camps, slapped around. I've had a number of emergency response, very deep traumatic activities, pulling people out of wrecks.
You were at Ground Zero, weren't you?
Yeah, I was at Ground Zero. I was also at Ground Zero in two places. One was the Oklahoma City bombing. The other was at the World Trade Center the day of 9/11, that evening, actually. So I've had plenty of trauma and reason to fear. But these other experiences were terrifying to the point of paralysis. And so I can't dismiss them as I have and process them as I have with other traumatic experiences.
Are you okay about talking about what you saw?
I am. If I, you'll see a lot of times when I'm talking about some of these irrefutable experiences, I'll rub my arms or whatever, because I get a chill down my spine, and you get, the classic chicken skin that is indicative of terror versus just fear. And a lot of my colleagues have the same.
What happened to you? What were those traumatic incidents?
So a variety of them in childhood, but again, I scientifically, as a skeptic, myself as a kid, dismissed those.
And what did you see as a child? What do you think was happening?
I saw beings through my bedroom window staring at me with huge dark eyes. Here we go. That scared the bejesus out of me. And it was terrifying to the point of paralysis.
And you told yourself as a child it was some kind of dream.
Not just me. I told my parents I would scream once I returned to a state where I could scream. So a lot of folks I know as a cognitive psychologist, I used to claim that I was a cognitive neuroscientist. I dabble in neuroscience, but cognitive psychology is very clear about a lot of the behavioral mechanisms that we use when we're afraid. And paralysis, with many of us, when we're in that terror mode, you're paralyzed to the point where you open your mouth and you try to scream and you can't. And so it was like that. As soon as that paralysis was lifted, I screamed to holy hell, and my parents came running in, and they tried to calm me down. Both my dad and my mom. My dad was an aerospace physicist who I pushed back routinely on, especially for lecturing me about the great Santa Claus conspiracy. And it infuriated me that he was trying to push this ridiculous notion of this chubby guy orbiting the Earth with a sack of presents like John Glenn, who he would lecture me to. So I didn't take a lot of what he was telling me, that there were no such thing as monsters, there are no such thing as little spacemen with big eyes, and there's no such thing as ant people, and just trying to calm me down. Much like I claim our government is doing to us about this subject. So
let's start with that.
Okay.
Do you believe that we are being visited by non-human intelligences on this planet?
So I like that you use that word belief, because there's a broad range between belief and knowledge. I asked you last night where and when you were born. And a lot of us automatically consider that to be a fact, because we're told it time after time after time, and we're shown birth certificates. But I don't know that I was born in Idaho Falls, Idaho in 1959. I have to believe it because I don't have any alternative. But I do know that I attended Burke Elementary School in Peabody, Massachusetts in my young years. I know that I attended Peabody Veterans Memorial High School from all of the deep emotional experiences that I had. So emotion is a really, really important aspect of this. So I know that. The reason that I believe that I'm going to say that I know that I was visited by non-human entities. I know that for a fact.
From childhood?
I believe in retrospect that those childhood instances were of the same nature, but I have three what I consider to be irrefutable experiences.
Okay, let's talk about those irrefutable experiences. What convinced you that irrefutably there is a non-human intelligence that's been engaging with you in particular?
Okay, number one, dreams don't cause bruises. And I woke up after a terrifying night with some very mysterious circumstances surrounded by prior to my going to bed. I woke up with 3 dark bruises on the inside of my right bicep. Not my left, just my right. And there was another bruise up here. And the only way that I can imagine those bruises occurring was with that sort of a grasp.
A 3-fingered hand.
4 fingers, because one was on the back.
I suppose, yes. Sorry.
Yeah. I could not, and I racked my brain time after time to try to come up with some way that I could have those 3 almost puncture kinds of bruises on the. I can't even reach that. But there's another aspect of the anomalous behavior with that, and that is as soon as I got up in the morning, I went straight downstairs to get a video camera to film it. And that is totally anonymous behavior for me. Now, I'm no, like a lot of tier 1 guys, I'm no stranger to the gym, but I've never done, bodybuilding or posing or any of the rest of that stuff. I've never taken a picture of myself in the mirror. Why the heck would I do that on that particular morning? It's not a rational behavior.
Do you believe you've been abducted?
That experience leads me to believe that. Yes, absolutely. Because I clearly didn't want to go if somebody, or a non-human entity, I think it was a biological robot, but I didn't want to go where it wanted me to go. So technically, that is the definition of an abduction, right?
You never had any exposure to UAPs in the course of your operations
Never.
as a serviceman?
Nope. I've been right in on a number of special access programs. I started one myself. It didn't get anywhere. It was canceled about a month after I started it. So I've been in that realm quite a bit, but none of it had anything to do with UFOs, aliens, or anything like that.
What do you think of the idea that we are being visited by a non-human intelligence? I mean, why would a non-human intelligence, an alien being, sneak into your bedroom at night when you were a little boy?
Yeah. So to me, it's a numbers game, right? When you look at the age of the Earth, when you look at the billions of stars seen by Hubble, and then galaxies seen by Webb, I mean, the numbers are just astronomical. So when all of that stuff, it makes no sense that we're the only, it's such an arrogant perspective to take that we're the only ones. So in and amongst all of that, a wide variety of visitors have come to our little island in the ocean, just like a wide variety of visitors came to the West Indies and came here and there. So here's the counter question I would pose to anybody that would ask me this. I pose to you. If you were part of a culture sailing from Australia, westward or eastward, wherever you want to go, and you come across an island full of life, are you just going to sit there or are you going to study it? It is a natural curiosity that all beings have. And so I believe that at least one or two, from my perspective, 2 species are visiting us, and I feel like many other abductees, like a lab rat, that we are being prodded and poked and experimented with as part of scientific discovery.
You're a former, very senior, high-ranking Tier 1 operator.
Okay. I consider myself middle management, but that's okay.
You've had a top-secret SCI clearance at times?
Oh, far before going into that world. I had a TSSCI and a bunch of other clearances as a nuclear weapons delivery officer.
You were entrusted with guarding nuclear weapons and deploying them if necessary in combat.
No, not just guarding them. I was a Pershing II missile battery commander. Not a very good one. I happened to be placed in charge. I was blessed with the opportunity to command troops on 5 separate occasions. The first one of those was as a Pershing II missile battery commander.
But the particular point about people who are put in charge of nuclear missile silos, nuclear missile batteries, is you have to be emotionally stable.
Yes, and the way that we establish that is through the Personnel Reliability Program, the PRP. And so one of the critical factors there is that as a BC, as a battery commander, every morning I had to review the sick slips for everybody under my command that went on sick call, and I had to determine whether or not they were still fit for nuclear duties. So if anything, if there's a domestic disturbance at home, if they get administered narcotics, I have to remove them from their duties, and it's a problem because others got to fill in for them. So it's a problematic situation. So all of us were heavily scrutinized, more so than even some of the other UAP witnesses. I know I have the utmost respect for David Fravor, for Alex Dietrich, for Ryan Graves, and all of the credibility and reliability that they have to fly that $15 million, $18, $30 million jet. But it's different when you can start World War III. An F-18 isn't going to start World War III unless it launches a nuke. My guys could start World War III. And so those records, their medical records, are actually locked away in a separate part of the clinic under intense scrutiny because of that factor.
So John Blitch was a particularly stable person to be in charge of a nuclear missile battery.
That might be a good question to ask my daughters or my wife, but arguably, I'm not telling you that. The United States Army is telling you that because they kept me in that role.
And yet you are saying you've had encounters with non-human beings.
Not just me. There are 4 other PRP qualified military abductees who have gone on record. And so this is my question to you. And Terry Lovelace is probably the most prominent of all. And Mario Woods, Jeff Goodrich, Bob Jacobs, who I know you've talked about, and of course Robert Hastings, who investigated all this and himself was an abductee. Here's the thing, is if you can't trust a sergeant who was in the PRP and had this experience and then went on to leave the Air Force and not only rise up through the ranks as a prominent lawyer, but become a prosecutor and an assistant attorney general for the state of Vermont. If you can't trust that guy.
You're talking about Terry Lovelace.
Yes. Who are you going to trust? And I challenge anybody in Congress
to
have that level of credibility.
There's a correlation, obviously, between your involvement with nuclear weapons and your encounters with these beings. But do you think there's a causation? Do you think the fact that you were involved with nuclear weapons in such an intimate way caused them to take an interest?
So I sponsored what we call a glamp out here recently, where we all get around a fire. There are things that military people tell each other around a fire that they'll not tell anybody else, right? It's kind of like the proverbial hairdresser, right? Your confessions, hairdresser confessions. We bantered that around. We've been around the horn collectively. Chicken or egg? Horse or cart? Did we get grabbed because of our proximity to the nuclear industry? For me, there's another level because I was born next to a nuclear reactor. The Army's first nuclear test reactor in Idaho Falls, Idaho. That's where I was born, and so I have to wonder about that. So what I do know from our own science, our own behavioral science and biological science, is we would grab polar bears, we would abduct polar bears in the Arctic and do the same thing that they do to us. We scoop their fat, we take tissue samples, We processed that tissue to analyze whether or not the evil Russian Empire was launching nukes in excess of 20 kilotons, 50 kilotons, a megaton. And so it's really important to not only analyze what the yield on those weapons were, but what the magnitude of the absorption in the entire the vegetation and the bioaccumulation of that vegetation into the animals. So why wouldn't they do that with us? It makes all the sense in the world. The logic of it is irrefutable.
A lot of people watching this are going to be going, this is insane. You're saying you've been abducted. You were in charge of nuclear weapons.
So if I'm insane, why did you put me in charge of nukes? Why did you let Mario Woods secure those? Why did you let, and he has another irrefutable experience where his truck ends up in the middle of Arctic tundra in South Dakota, covered with ice and snow, and here's this circle of mud, no tire tracks, here's this truck.
It's just been dropped back.
How does that happen?
So you believe
That's not a dream.
alien beings are visiting this planet and taking an interest in
There's no
people
doubt.
like yourself?
There's no doubt in my mind anymore. I can dismiss my childhood dreams. I can't dismiss bruises on my arm. I can't dismiss my kids and my wife telling me that I was gone for 5 hours approximately for a 1 hour bike ride.
So let's tell that story. I find the bike ride story fascinating.
Do you?
What happened?
I had returned from Oklahoma City, pretty traumatic situation where, there was an amputation from somebody. It wasn't me, but her leg had to be amputated just to get her out of the rubble. And a lot of people don't realize, that the horrific decisions that incident commanders have to make in collapsed structures, because you have to make the call as to whether or not to bring in heavy lift material. You could be literally squashing potential victims as you bring this just to get to other victims. So it's a horrific decision to have to make. So very traumatic, and I had a lot of that going on in my head. So I adopted a mountain bike ride meditation protocol on the weekends to ride from my house, which happened to be in a little sprawling little yuppie kind of suburb of Denver called Highlands Ranch. And at that time, in 1995, MacArthur Ranch was an undeveloped area. So it was about 7 miles away. And so I got on my mountain bike and I would ride up to a place called Daniels Park, which is now heavily developed. But at that time, it wasn't. And it was a gorgeous place to go up and meditate with the Rocky Mountains. I used to claim that it looked like a Coors Light backdrop. I'm looking at a beer can. And it was amazing. So I would go up and sit on, they have a bunch of, at that time they were concrete. I think they'd been filled in at this point, picnic tables, and I would meditate, just like I learned through my martial arts training. It was wonderful. And so I would be totally calm and relaxed after that. And it was a moderate climb up. It wasn't anything that got me into a high zone. I would barely break a sweat. It wasn't a particularly difficult climb. And so on my way back down, and I'd done this ride several times before. And on my ride on the way up, after I came, it was a dirt road at that time. There was a chain link fence with 3 strands of barbed wire along the top. And I thought that was very curious, because why would a farmer, what are you farming back there? Is that a little bit of, this is before marijuana was legal in Colorado. So, but then I saw a sign that said Indian burial grounds. Please respect and keep out. So, made sense to me. Now, my great-grandfather took an Indian wife as part of the migration. So I have, I guess, some portion, maybe an eighth of my bloodline has Native American background. And I've always been very respectful of that culture.
Which tribe?
Sioux.
Right.
So he came straight off the boat from Scotland and made the launch across there. So I was mildly curious, but I had never entertained even the slightest notion of violating that request. And on the way back down, I'm gliding along, and all of a sudden, so I go past it, and suddenly there is an urge, sort of an uncontrollable urge, that I got to get in there.
Get to the Indian burial ground.
Yeah. So I turn my bike around, get off my bike. I go back to some of my special forces training, and you get, I go into Jason Bourne mode, right? And I'm trying to figure out how am I going to get over this doggone fence. And then I noticed that on each side of the fence there was a gate with a lock, but the gate isn't as heavily barricaded as the fence, and it dips down a little bit. So we naturally were trained to look for little niches like that. So I climb up the pole, toss my mountain bike over the top, catch my jersey in a couple places, and get back down. And I'm about to get on it, and then I had this, again, respectful notion come welling up. Nope, I'm not going to ride. I'm going to walk my bike and just be respectful and see what's back there. So I do. Come around a corner, long dirt road, and I'm just kind of hobbling along my little bike shoes. And I feel a little bit of moisture on the tip of my nose. And I'm curious about it because I haven't been working hard on the way downhill to sweat. So it must be sweat. And so I kind of ignore it, and it drops onto my hand on my handlebars. So I had these weird ramshade handlebars, and I had duct tape across it to hold my GPS. So I was involved in the very early testing of small portable GPSs for the entire special operations community, primarily because I'm convinced I was lost more than any detachment commander in the history of special forces. So they gave me a bunch of these gizmos, me and a couple of my guys, and we tested them out. So I was a techno geek, and I was all about GPSs. So I'm looking down, and I do a double take because it's not clear. It's dark. And then I realize with shock that it's blood. And so all of a sudden, I get this kind of a gusher, bloody nose, which I had not had since I was a kid. Now, I have had my nose broken on multiple occasions, twice by women, believe it or not, testing for my black belt, and in a relay, a medley relay where I think I was swimming butterfly, and the other gal hit me in the face on the way in the water. So it's not unconscionable or abnormal, but it was abnormal in the sense that I had gone a year. We had been living in Denver, for a year. So it wasn't, that I was desiccated from the high desert air. And it was sudden, and it was vigorous. It wasn't a slight drip. So it was just kind of weird. So, of course, Boy Scout training, I lay down, put my nose back, and I'm figuring, well, I'll get back up here in 5 minutes, get back on the bike and continue this, and then eventually I'll get back on the bike and ride home. And as soon as I lay down, I am out. I am unconscious. And the next feeling I remember is like a very deep chill. Like I had been sleeping outside a sleeping bag. I was chilled to the bone. It was a core temperature problem, and so I bolt upright, and I grab my bike, and there's a light, so that this road had turned like this, and so I was at this corner, and I did a very curious, again, anomalous behavior that I can't explain. Instead of walking my bike down that road, or getting on my bike because I was cold, and walking the rest of the way downhill, gradual decline, I feel compelled to climb up through this scrub oak, scratching at my legs, and they were bloody and scratched up, when I finally got home, to go up to this light. I'm like a moth to this flame. And now I was a graduate student at the Colorado School of Mines. I was still on active duty, but Colorado School of Mines, naturally, I'm used to seeing mining apparatus. So my mind goes there, and I think, oh, this must be a drill rig. I'm not sure why people would drill at night instead of during the day, but I'm not thinking any of that. I'm just like, okay, so I am naturally, again, drawn to this thing in an anomalous behavior to go uphill through a crazy route to get up onto this plateau. So I get up there, and I see what I think, but it's a very fuzzy memory, is a fuel truck. And so I walk my bike along, and I purposely put my bike between me and the truck. There's something about the truck that doesn't feel right. And I position the bike, and as I go past the cab, I look into the cab because I want to talk to somebody and see what the hell's going on. And what I remember in my mind's eye is a red plaid shirt. And I don't have a image of the face. I feel like it's a male presence, but I don't have an image of a face.
Is it human?
I don't know. At that point, as a conscious memory, I don't know. What I do remember is stopping, becoming terrified, and not wanting to go anywhere closer to the light. And I turn around and I sneak my way back around the back of the truck, and there's some sort of activity over here, and I sneak my way back around the back of the truck, and I am dragging my bike through scrub brush until I finally come upon an open road. It was the scrub there, the scrub oak there would have been very difficult. I don't like the word impossible. I don't like ever, always, or any of those absolutes. But it would have been very, very difficult for me to even get one pedal stroke through it. So I made my way to this dirt road, and as soon as I got to that dirt road, I jumped on that bike, and again, with sheer abject terror, pedaled that bike as fast as I could to get the hell out of there. Huge adrenaline rush. So I make it up this gradual incline, and now I'm coasting down this dirt road. Never mind, it's taking me in the opposite direction. I need to go home. I just need to get out of there. So I remember coasting down this road, and I'm thinking, okay, well, it's after dark. It can't be that long after dark. I mean, it was the middle of the afternoon for crying out. It was a nosebleed. It's not like I was knocked unconscious. I didn't fall off my bike or anything that would have explained that longer term of unconsciousness. And as I'm riding down, I start thinking about, oh, geez, Cindy, my wife, is going to be worried about me. So I probably ought to call her because it's probably later than I think it is. So as I'm coming down and I see this lone ranch house off to the right, as you may know, a lot of the ranch world leaves a light on, right? It's the old Red Roof Inn, we'll leave a light on for you. And there was one light on. And so I deviate, and I'm going to go up and knock on the door and ask them to use their telephone. This is 95, no cell phones. and I stopped. I skidded to a halt because I suddenly realized there are no lights on in that house. So then I realized it has to be real late. It's not an hour or two after sunset. This is really, really late. So I get back on my bike and I cruise down, and I finally make it to this hardball, which I now know is Highway 85, and I've taken this trip since then. And I hit the wall. It's kind of like a bonk during a bike race or any endurance race where you are just devoid of any fuel. And I was barely keeping myself vertical. So I'm cranking, and I use an odd number of counts, 1, 2, 3, coast, 1, 2, 3, and I make it about a mile until I get to this, and there's another indicator of how late it is there's very little traffic. Every now and then, maybe once every 5 minutes, a car goes by. And I don't have any reflective lights or anything. This is an afternoon ride. So I remember climbing up this hill, and there was a 7-Eleven, and I pull into this 7-Eleven, and I had some emergency cash on me, just typical mountain biker stuff. So I make it into the 7-Eleven, and in the front of the windows, I prop my bike up against it, and I notice that there's a police cruiser pulled up, and the windows are down. And as I'm walking, clicking along past this police cruiser to go into the 7-Eleven, because I'm severely dehydrated, I am dying of thirst. And so I thought I'd hear my name come across this police radio, which is weird. So I go in, and I get 3 large 32-ounce orange Gatorade jugs. One, I open the top and chug it before I even get to the counter. And the clerk is looking at me, and I plop that down, and I put a 20 on, and they're like, okay. And so I leave it, the empty one, and then I go outside. And as I exit the store, the cop gets out and comes up to me and says, excuse me, sir, is your name John Blitch? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, well, I just want to let you know that your wife put out a missing persons report. And I've already called in that I thought that was you. And can I offer you a ride home? Now, this is where the athlete's ego would normally say, hell no, man. That's like asking me to carry my rucksack. How dare you? What an affront. What an affront to my physical stamina. But what I really said was, oh yeah, thanks a bunch. Because I felt like I'd run a marathon.
Was it a fuel truck?
I don't know. I can't tell you.
You think you were taken?
What I don't want to get into is a reconstructed memory after a hypnosis
You just
session.
don't know.
What's that?
You just don't know.
At that point, I did not know.
What do you know now?
What I believe now is that, yes, I was taken. And now I'm very clear in my book about what memories I have consciously, and then what memories are reconfigured, restrung together in a regression, a hypnosis regression session.
You've been a warrior, but you have a doctorate.
Yes, I have a master's degree in math and computer science with a focus on artificial intelligence and robotics. That was my first trip. That's what I was studying when this event happened. There was there were 2 other curious events at that time. But later, after running my search and rescue business, and I had to shut that down after destroying my femur, life-threatening event. It happened immediately after Hurricane Katrina. I'd love to give you some wonderfully heroic story, but the truth of the matter is I was goofing around on a jet ski and ran it into a dock and broke my femur, got infected, had to lay everybody off. And then I went back to graduate school a second time for a second master's degree in cognitive psychology and a PhD in cognitive psychology.
So you've got a master's degree in psychology.
And a PhD.
You know when somebody's suffering from a delusion or a psychosis or a hallucination? Was it that?
Well, let me back up a little bit, because I'm not gonna, I appreciate your supreme confidence in me, Ross, but I am not a psychiatrist. So I am not trained to diagnose who's crazy and who's not. That being said, yeah, I have a lot of training, specifically in mental state of robot operators. That's what I focused on. I use EEG. This is what I used to call myself a neuroscientist, but I'm not. The fact of the matter is I use neurophysiological equipment to get at how people are thinking when they're driving robots around. So based on that, and again, I'm not crazy, not because I'm claiming it, because the U.S. military and the Army and then the Air Force say that, because I wouldn't have had a clearance. What I do have now a distinct appreciation for is the crisp memories versus what I consider to be manipulated memories. And it's a very clear thing for me, because when I was in that classified organization, we didn't use typical military name tags. And so facial recognition, there's a part of your brain called the fusiform face area that is specifically lights up when you're trying to recognize faces. And so we know this through occupations that are inherently dependent upon facial recognition. So I'm not going to claim, my ego wants me to claim that I have some sort of eidetic memory. That's not true. That's not the case. But I had a really good memory of faces. And I can't get over, I couldn't at that time get over the notion that I couldn't remember that face.
So something was screwing with your perception, you think?
Yes, absolutely.
If something's capable of screwing with your perception, how do we know what it is? And how do we have any idea of whether it's benevolent or malevolent?
Yeah, so concurrent with that experience, there were two other experiences that are very crisp for me and independently corroborated. The first was walking into a mall. My youngest daughter and I were late to link up with my oldest daughter and my wife. We cut through a Barnes & Noble. And we're walking along, and she's in a rush because she wants to link up with Mom, because Mom's going to take her clothes shopping, get ready for the school year. And I stopped dead in my tracks, because as I was walking along, I glanced over to my right, and there was a bookshelf, kind of like those shelves there, and there was the Whitley Strieber book, Communion.
Ah, right, with the alien face on the front.
Yeah, and all I had to do was glance at it. All I had to do, this is what happens. This is the tingles that are going on.
So it's very real to you.
Say that again?
It's very real to you. There's no doubt in your mind that it's real.
Oh, it's a physiological response. I mean, I am on the edge of terror right now. And I've recalled this hundreds of times, but every time it's still. So looking at that face, and I froze in the middle of that store. My daughter walked all the way out of the store, realized I wasn't behind her, came back in, and in the middle of my paralysis, looking at that face, there's a tug on my hand, and she's like, "Dad, come on, we're already late." And she brings me out of it. So this is, again, anomalous behavior. So we go link up with my wife, and I turn right back around, and I go up and I buy that book, and as soon as I pay for it, I rip the cover off and I crumple it up and throw it in the trash.
What had it done to you to make you feel that terror?
I don't know.
Do you think there was something, or was it just the look of the face, the strangeness of the face?
So looking back through the childhood experience, that face was identical to the faces that were looking at me through the window. More anomalous behavior. I would have to close almost in an OCD, like obsessive compulsive disorder type of behavior. I would have to check the drapes and lock the doors 5 or 6 times. It's that behavioral aspect of this that I can't get away from.
The idea behind what we're discussing in this story is that a group of men are coming forward to corroborate that the government is aware of a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet.
Yes.
That it's lying. I mean, as recently as a few days before this interview.
That the government's lying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, the abduction, so in my book, I have a chapter called The Elephant in the UAP Room. To me, the abduction phenomena is the linchpin to this whole thing. And what it does is it gives the cabal, if you want to call it, the lying, cover-up organization or loose organization, whatever it is, everybody involved in that cover-up, a way out. And the reason is that there is nothing more terrifying as a parent to have your kids taken from you, kidnapped from you, while you are sitting there paralyzed, powerless to see it, powerless to do anything.
What do you think of a government that's concealed such a secret, if this is true?
Yeah, so this is what I haven't been able to resolve through 65 orbits around the planet, and 25 of those in the U.S. military as an active duty new SF DARPA program manager, and then another 7 years as a senior scientist for the Air Force. The government is full of great people. They, especially the military folks, firefighters, law enforcement folks, none of them get paid enough for the risks that they take compared to other folks that, you take a high school class, the folks that go into the military versus the folks that go to law school or learn a trade and become million, gazillion, billionaires, whatever. There is a selfless service of joining the military. I know that a lot of the civilian world look at us kind of like Colonel Jessup from A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth, right? The way we look at ourselves is, hey, look, we're more like kind of Rocky in the Balboa thing. Look, the world's not sunshine and rainbows. So this gives them an out that we can't protect you. What I want my government to admit to me is, sorry, we were powerless. I don't think we're powerless anymore. You heard Dave Grush's testimony about, you interviewed him about the crash retrieval process. I know you've recently interviewed some other folks with direct personal experience, not just watching reports, the folks that have been involved in that. And what makes sense about that to me is that the reason why Dave is still alive and Lou is still alive and a lot of other whistleblowers are still alive is I believe that we now do have the ability to protect some of us. We do have the ability to shoot down some of these craft and to interfere with this kidnapping abduction process. I consider it a universal right of any being, any living species, to be able to protect their children. So what makes total sense to me is a government that has kept it secret just like we would keep secret from our own children. Look, there's Mr. Jones down the street there. My wife and I know, child molester. I'm not going to tell my kids that. Just stay away from this house. But Dad, he's going to pay me $50 just to shovel his driveway. Stay away from him. Why? Don't worry about it. So I think that's where we are with our government.
Nearly a year ago, I asked you if you could help me check somebody out.
Yeah.
His name was Jake Barber.
Yep.
And you took him out on your boat.
Yeah.
Off Santa Monica. And you met him and some of his team.
Yeah.
Special operators can figure each other out, can't they? You know, as Tier 1 operators, you know whether somebody's embellishing their record. What was the impression that you gained of Jake Barber and his colleagues?
Well, so you asked me a while ago, or to give it some thought about why I believe it. Several reasons. Top of the list is demeanor. We do have that ability to recognize the way someone carries themselves and the way they present themselves. If it's one person, that's one thing. 4 folks all acting in that manner, hard to dismiss. Second is documentation. And the documentation that I have been provided from these folks lines up very consistently. And the third is the behavior. So you have demeanor as one thing. Behavior is another. So as a leader, I feel compelled to take risk first. So I laid out 3 forms of identification: my passport, my military ID, I think it was my, maybe it was my Air Force Academy ID and some of them. And without hesitation, every one of them laid out their ID. I was looking for a little hesitation because it was 4 against 1, and these guys could kick my butt up once, down the other. I'm worried that I'm gonna slit my throat and they're gonna dump me over the side and they're gonna sail my boat, I don't know, to Australia, I don't know. So, so those points, but the key aspect of it is that their stories connect the dots of why keep this a secret, right? Why are we trying to, so when you compare this to the Manhattan Project, right, which a lot of folks do. Manhattan Project was kept secret for 5 years. Thousands of people involved in that. 5 years. How the hell did we keep this secret? We're going on 80 years since Foo Fighters were originally reported.
And that's one of the arguments that people often make to me, that it's impossible to keep this kind of thing
secret. And it's not a secret. We're talking about it, aren't we? We're talking about it, aren't we? The secret is out. And it has been out from the get-go in open literature. So I think I mentioned to you, I'm kind of part of the invisible college. I've been studying this since grade school, reading my dad's books. He has, and what's interesting is he and I have both purchased multiple books. He passed away and I have inherited his library. And now I have duplicate copies of them. I would say 25% of that library is duplicate between the two of us. So everybody else, while they're on boring sentry duty and they're reading, comic books or I'm reading this.
Could what you've experienced and Jake and his colleagues have experienced just be a bunch of Special Forces guys deluding themselves?
Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Is it probable? No. Occam's razor cuts through all of those. Every single, so when you're connecting dots, I liken this to my grandkids' sketch by numbers set, right? Where you got to connect 15 or 30 or 50 different dots. Their story connects all the dots.
So the implications of these men's allegations, of Jake's allegations, the implications of Jake's allegations are that there is a UAP crash retrieval program that we, the United States together in collusion with some private aerospace companies, is concealing, lying to the American public and the world
Sure.
about the existence of non-human intelligence engaging with this planet.
Sure. And I am okay with that. I was okay with that lie up until the turn of the century in 9/11. Because it is so terrifying. Look, lights in the sky, that's not terrifying enough to keep a secret. Even the fact that some of those lights in the sky are craft with beings on board, that's not terrifying enough. That's not something to protect society from. Kidnapping, plucking children from the bed with their parents, or off of a mountain bike, or while they're at school, the aerial school. I know you're familiar with all of those, and of course the
Westall case.
Westall, yeah, I know you're familiar with all those. That is a level of terror that would threaten any sort of society.
So this is interesting. You think that one of the reasons for the government cover-up, and it's only a very small number of people, obviously, in the government who do know about this. I doubt a lot of presidents have been told about this secret. You think that a large part of the reason for the cover-up is because the abduction phenomenon...
It is the reason.
...is real.
It is the linchpin to this whole thing. Imagine you're Harry Truman, 1947. Pieces broken out all over. And you get brought, or you are shown, wreckage of egg-shaped craft, discs, avocado-shaped craft, and bodies inside that are clearly not human. And mixed in with that are human body parts. What are you going to do?
So you've heard that allegation?
Oh, there are many stories about that within the special ops community. Because we're the folks, you know, in Vietnam. So during Vietnam, there was friction between the Air Force and the Army, in particular, and the Marine Corps, where if a pilot went down deep in the jungle and the closest Americans to that pilot happened to be a Marine platoon or a Special Forces ODA, an A-team, they were retasked. Never mind setting an ambush over here. You got to go get this pilot. Major, lieutenant colonel, whatever. Well, wait a minute. I'm going to put 30 of my guys at risk for one frickin' colonel? Maybe. And then there are all the, so there was a lot of risk and friction with regards to that. So the Air Force stood up its own recovery efforts because it got to the point that, hey, look, if you're not going to go rescue our pilots, guess what? Next time you call for close air support, good luck. So you're going to have to do your own close air support, and it made no sense. So the pararescue community stood up within the Air Force, and those folks are full-on, flat-out heroes every time they go in because they are deep behind enemy lines, just like Special Forces guys, just like Navy SEALs, and they are specialists at plucking people out of twisted wreckage, right? That's a special skill set that you have to do. So fast forward to Harry Truman. If we shoot down another one of these things, and I am here to postulate, again, this is a belief, not knowledge, that we were playing with radar at White Sands and Wright-Patterson in a variety of these things, and we were cranking that power up, not with the intent to shoot anything down, because we can't shoot down our aircraft with that. We don't have electronics that are vulnerable to that. But as we're cranking up that power to extend the range, here's this vehicle, advanced vehicle with electromagnetic navigation, not propulsion, but interferes with the propulsion. Next thing you know, it flies into the side of a mountain. So if we use PJs, pararescue folks, to rescue our own astronauts, pluck them out of the water after Apollo 11, 12, 13, who are you going to send to grab the wreckage? It makes all the sense in the world.
So you believe Jake Barber is telling the truth?
Absolutely.
There has
Absolutely.
been a cover-up lasting 80 years.
Absolutely.
We've recovered craft.
Absolutely.
Alien bodies.
Yeah. And we have reverse engineered that to the point that now we can shoot down at will, not by mistake, using, just cranking up the power on our high-powered microwaves.
One thing that strikes me about the difference between the way you talk about these beings and the way the other people I've interviewed for this story talk, you're the first person to suggest possible malevolence.
Well, so the title of my book is the Abduction Amnesty Knot, little k, big N-O-T. And I use knot because knots can be complicated, right? You ever tried to untie, some sort of, so especially as now a reluctant sailor. But the subtitle is The Case for Forgiveness in the Disclosure Age. And so there's two entities to forgive here. One are the abductors, because they do bring us back. I mean, I was brought back to my bedroom. I was brought back to my bike, put back on my bike, or put back next to it, and I got back up and got it. Many of us have our memories tampered with in much the same way that we pharmacologically do the same thing. Talk to any anesthesiologist. We can pharmacologically prospectively remove memory with an injection plus or minus 30 seconds. So I've happened to have 21 different surgeries to repair my Humpty Dumpty body, a lot of it with my own just lack of skill. And I could tell you several cases where I know that occurred. So if we can do that right now, it makes all the sense in the world that with directed energy, fine-tuned to the hippocampal region and all of the memory consolidation networks in our own brains, it makes sense that they could do it. And so one sign of benevolence is to remove the memory of the trauma. Look, I told Lou this. I abducted my lovable black Labrador retriever every 3 months to go to the vet. He did not want to go to the vet. He had the equivalent of the bruises on his arm. I don't know if he had bruises under his coat of his harness, but I had to drag him in there for good reasons.
What you're suggesting begs the question. There will likely be secrets that lie behind what's happened inside the legacy retrieval program.
Sure.
That many people will find confronting.
Sure.
But is any of that sufficient reason not to reveal it?
Well, so let me ask you this in an analogy. There's good secrets, bad secrets, in my mind. I am not going to tell my grandkids the code to my gun safe. We should not be advertising a cookbook of how to take plutonium and create a nuclear weapon. So clearly those things we need to keep secret. However, the existence of extraterrestrial life, and it's not just extraterrestrial, if you can travel faster than light than it takes to get here, you can bend time and you can cross dimensions. Those three are linked. We know this. In fact, this page, there's several pages in Lou's book where he and Hal Puthoff diagram a bubble that dictates that you can manipulate time. So what I have issue with right now with the common verbiage right now is the word threat. Just because a object or craft is in our airspace, that does not make it a threat. It is clear when you read that part that they can slow that down, and so it is child's play to avoid collisions. So there is no threat of collision. I I love these folks. I love the pilots that report these things, but I vehemently push back against the notion that there is any threat of a collision. It's the equivalent of me being in a 50-knot Mark VI Navy patrol craft that can do 40 knots, claiming that I'm a threat with my sailboat that flat out maybe can do 8 knots. There is no threat of that collision. So this notion of just being in our airspace as a threat is ridiculous, and it's a real problem for us as a galactic species.
John, if you have been abducted, and if there is a non-human intelligence, it's not inconceivable that one day you might actually get the opportunity to meet your abductors.
I already did. A tall, 7-ish foot praying mantis looking being was upset with me and was
this
chastising me.
This was during one of your abduction events?
This is right around the same time as this mountain bike incident. It was the environment that I thought it was in my bedroom on the third floor of a split-level house, and it came through a sliding screen door. There was a deck out there, 3 stories up, no stairs down, and just walked right through the door, was standing over me. And again, I was terrified, frozen, paralyzed to the bed. And I got a male presence vibe from this being. And he's just looking at me very intently and explaining to me, look, this body that you got, it is just a soul housing group. It's a brain housing group. It is just a machine that your soul occupies for this lifetime. And so, yeah, we're going to mess with it. We're going to get up under the hood and we're going to adjust the carburetor, right? I had just dated myself there. We may swap a couple of parts out, but we can't steal you. We can't steal your soul. We can't steal your consciousness. So quit screaming and writhing around and let us do our frickin' job. And it's like the equivalent of a surgeon telling the patient, stop squiggling, just like the veterinarian to my Labrador Retriever, hold him down for crying out loud. I gotta be able to check this tendon. And so I got that very condescending and vigorous instruction. But here's the thing. As proof, there was this image that he put him, and it was terrifying. His mandibles that were kind of behind like a casing or a shell opened up, and he starts grabbing chunks of my cheek, and he's ripping it, and there's blood spattering on the wall, and I'm feeling the tug, and I'm feeling this flesh, and the whole time he is conveying to me, see, we can't get your soul. We could do a lot of damage to your body if we want to. We don't. We're trying to help you, but this is how bad it could get. So stop squiggling around and let us get this done.
And was that physical damage to your cheek real?
No, I felt the tugging, and I had the visual, again, a false, fuzzy memory.
What do you think of the people that have concealed this secret?
I think the vast majority of them are heroes because they were doing it for the right reasons. The reason why people kept the Manhattan Project secret was not because you're going to threaten them with jail. That doesn't work. out of 100 people, you threaten everybody with jail, there's going to be a 10 to 20% that are just, they're going to do it anyway. If you can explain to them that it's in the best interest for society, they'll keep it a secret. I think that's what's happened here. That a large number of the folks in this are unwitting. But once they understand and they're shown direct evidence of these crashes and the deceased non-human intelligent bodies, some of which are biological robots, some of it are sentient beings. The grasshopper guy, for me, sentient being without a doubt. The little gray guys, biological robots. So that is such a significant threat that they feel that, yeah, society is not ready.
As a cognitive psychologist, or one who's been trained as a cognitive psychologist, final question.
Sure.
The implication of this is that human beings have capacities that we don't yet understand to communicate with an intelligence telepathically, psychically, because the connection with this technology is done psionically.
Very little doubt of that in my mind as well. So my technical training is in EEG, brainwave monitoring. And I use that in a naturalistic sense. So I have big issues with, and I know Gary Knowles is gonna try to, we'll have a lively discussion about this. My claim is that your brain, when we put you in a laboratory, that brain does not act the same way as when you're in a non-laboratory setting. So my focus is on what I call naturalistic measurement, naturalistic neurophysiological measurement of you. So I use wireless EEG underneath a ball cap or underneath a helmet so that it's so comfortable you forget you're wearing it. The first time I wore it was climbing Mount Shasta in 2009. Another story at some other time. So that there is no question in my mind that we right now, and you can look at many there's a vast literature about this, that we now know more about the human brain by gobs than even 10 years ago. It's an exponential acceleration of our knowledge. So the use of that to guide advanced craft make all the sense in the world.
The implications of it all, though, are, to come back to the point at the beginning of all of this, consciousness may not be local. We might in fact be part of a bigger, wider consciousness, and what we're plugging into with our minds is something that's more what we really are as human beings.
Yeah, I agree, and there's a very big danger here with our reverse engineered ability to shoot these things down. On a galactic basis, I want to use the honeybee analogy, right? So on this planet, with these beings that are beneath us, honeybees, we tolerate them. We harness them. They do good things. We use them to pollinate our crops. And so there's a symbiotic relationship with these. Enter killer bees, or Africanized bees, if you'd like. Now look at the honeybees. You know, if you mess with their nest, their planet, they're going to come at you with stingers, which I would draw the equivalent is our nuclear weapons. And that's not going to do anybody any good. But you'll stay away and you'll tell your kids, hey, don't go over by that tree, just leave them alone. The Africanized bees, the killer bees, that's not worth it anymore. That they are so aggressive and they are now lethal. And that's what I worry about, that we have gone from this to this.
Because we're using offensive weapons against them, you mean?
Yeah, and we're not discriminating friend versus foe. How do we know who's the bad guys up there? If you got a flying saucer or a little egg or whatever it is coming into our atmosphere, how do you know they're going to kidnap a kid out of the bedroom, or they're just going to welcome you aboard like the friendly space brothers and sisters that are rumored to have occurred. So we don't know that yet. The key to that IFF, the identify friend or foe, is what you just said, the consciousness, right? Because we humans do have that spider sense. And so maybe there are some of us who are sensitive enough to maybe do IFF right now and to aid in that process.